Ask her
If you listen to it.
I figured that'd be a fun way to start things. Alright. One, don't make more out of this than what it is. It is just an old person talking to you.
No, it's you talking to us.
So it's an old me talking to you.
It's not an old person, guys. It's still an old person.
Want
to hear the story? Be quiet.
Brain will jump around a lot. As I've mentioned before, I have with the letter I wrote you, the fact that I had to make sacrifices at the end of the year, and I don't give up the last 4 days for the talks I want to give. The drop, no, I have contact issues. Sorry, definitely not having emotions already. You're not worried.
I was like, that was really fast.
That was
right. Oh wow.
I thought about talking to you.
Oh my god.
No, it's just contact. Sorry. I have easily 8-9 days worth of stories and information I want to get across to you, but I cannot spend 8 to 9 days at the end of the year telling you stories because that's just not good teaching. It's bad enough that I take 4 days as opposed to like actual real teaching. But I figure I arrange my room in my classroom the way the year's gone that these 4 days I can do without a problem. The issue is trying to get my brain to figure out which of the 8 days worth of stories to get out. And I've pretty much cut it down to 3 main stories that I'll do, and then sort of a big summation, and then I try to have an introductory kind of thing today. But even in the introductory, there's so many different things I want to say and not enough time to say it. So you'll have to bear with me as I start and stop and seem to jump around a little bit. It's the drawback to, me being an oldish me. One, thanks for listening. The reason I say that is because if any of your other teachers were to tell you, hey, I'm going to spend the last week telling you stories, I don't think it would go over nearly as well, and yet here you guys are interested in listening to them. It wasn't always this way. I didn't start off my first, years of teaching telling stories at the end. That's not the way it goes. It was very an organic thing. Organic meaning it grew naturally. It's the way things happened. I used to show movies at the end of the year. It's what every teacher does. They show movies at the end of the year. And there's 2 reasons why teachers show movies at the end of the year. One is because we know that you guys are brain dead, and it makes things easier in class for you when you're not wanting to do anything else, so you can sit there and stare at a screen. Same thing you do for half the summertime. But the other reason why many teachers do it, is that there's a lot of homework that teachers have at the end of the year. The stuff that teachers give to you, and you guys get tired of all this crap that gets thrown on you and this paperwork and homework you have, we get the same thing from our principal, from the superintendent, forms that we have to fill out, things we have to get ready for the next year, and we don't want to do that any more than you want to do the homework that's given to you. But if we don't do our homework, we get fired. That's not so good. So because of that, we have to find a place to do it, and many teachers, when they're showing you a movie, they're working on getting that done, which is why instead of sitting in the back of the room eating popcorn, the teacher's like furiously at the computer typing stuff away. So that's what I did for many years, was go through and show movies at the end of the year. I don't now, which means I just do this thing called giving up sleep for like this next week, and it's overrated. But I think what I do this last week is important enough to me to make that balance. It's important enough to pass on this information to you that giving up the sleep at night and getting those things done at home is worth it to me. What changed for me as a teacher was about 5 or 6 years into my teaching career. And it was 2 things happened at once. One in the classroom and then one after school. And the after school one was I was sitting in my chair one day when there was a knock on my door. And I looked up, and it was a high school kid, a kid I taught in class years ago. Like, I hadn't seen them in 2 or 3 years since they were in 8th grade. And they leaned their head in, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? They're like, hey. They're like, can I come in? I go, why? Like, to talk. I go, to who? They go, to you. I go, okay, why? Because I never had that. The idea of going back and visiting a junior high teacher just to talk was foreign to me. I did not have junior high teachers I would go back and talk to. I have 3.5 junior high teachers I remember, and the reason one is a half is a math teacher. I don't remember her name. I remember just not hating her, and that was a good step. But then I had a teacher I do remember hating, and that was my 7th grade English teacher, Mrs. Eller. She was a fine teacher. I just did not get along with her. Called her Mrs. Oilface. She had a very shiny face. She's a wonderful person. I've actually talked to her since then and feel kind of bad, but that's my history, so I did not get along with my 7th grade English teacher. But I remember my 6th grade English teacher, Mrs. McGahee, and she was not a good teacher. She was very enthusiastic. She was fresh out of like the teacher factory. It was like I'm here. She just kind of like danced around and jumped the whole time. She's like, I just love life. And it was hard not to just enjoy being in her room because she was so enthusiastic. And then I remember my 8th grade English teacher, Mr. McIntosh. And Mr. McIntosh was not an outstanding teacher, but he was the first guy I remember who like made me laugh in class because he was sarcastic and like make fun of kids. And then the big thing he did that I remember was on his tests, he always put in random answers, just like things that would make fun of someone or like pop culture quotes and stuff like that. I was like, maybe I'm like, you can take a test and smile at the same time? That's weird. And so that's the thing I stole from him later when I became a teacher. I was like, I remember that. I was like, it always made me smile. So that's why I, for my test, put in like those random answers, those E's, is because I got that from Mr. McIntosh. Not teachers I would go back and visit. They were just ones that entertained me. And so the idea of this high school kid coming back to talk to me really threw me off. Now, don't get me wrong. I did have a teacher who got me to enjoy what I thought teaching should be, who I would go back and visit if given the chance. It wasn't until high school. It was a high school English teacher. I'm seeing a theme. It's like I like English or something. And he was my teacher in his sophomore and junior year. And his name was Mr. Purvis. He was actually one of my best friend's dads, which was also kind of weird. But the thing I liked about Mr. Purvis is he was the first old person I met who liked what he did. I came from a family where adults don't like their jobs. My dad hated his job, and my mom hated her job. My grandparents hated their jobs. Every adult I'd ever met just hated what they did for work. And this was the first adult I saw who just loved what he did. Every day he came in and smiled and loved doing different things, and he was old and bald, had a toupee, like would spin on top of his head and stuff like that. It was great. But he was so enthusiastic. And it didn't make me want to become a teacher. It just made me realize that some adults don't hate life. And that was a revelation for me. I was 15 years old before that really hit me. I just assumed all adults hated life. And you're young, you graduate, you go to college, you hate life. Like, that's just how things went. And I was like, maybe there's another option out there. And so when I went to college, I was a psychology student my first year of college because I wanted to be a psychologist. And then ironically, I did not want to go through 12 years of school to get a degree. So I said, I'll know what to do. I'll go become a teacher and go through infinity years. But it was after my first year of teaching, my first year of college, I got a job at a daycare center working with little kids. And it was one of those things where I came home, I was 19 years old, and I did not want to work at a movie theater because I did that in high school. That's another story. I did not want to work at a fast food restaurant because that looked dumb. And so I remember looking through like the paper and I was like, there has to be a job that's something else. And there was a daycare center. I was like, you can play with kids. And I'm like, I like playing. I like kids. Let's give it a try. And so I spent a summertime working at a play school with like 3, 4, 5, no, the 3-year-olds. It was 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds I got to work with. And I loved it. And I was in there and I played with these kids every day. And at the end of it, the ladies who I worked with, they're like, you should become a teacher. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a psychologist. They're like, you're really good with kids. I'm like, everyone's good with kids. They're like, no, like, you're good with kids. I'm like, everyone's like that. And they kept telling me, like, no, like, the way you connect is different. And so I came back my sophomore year, and I ended up switching over to become an English teacher. Because I was like, I wanted to enjoy what I did. And I was like, I really enjoyed teaching. Well, the summer school and being with kids, like, I love that. I was like, I could definitely do something like that the rest of my life and actually enjoy it. So I switched over. But this kid that came back to talk to me, he hung out for like an hour, and we just chatted about life. We went through and just talked about how he was doing, how high school was going, the choices he'd made, the sports he was playing, and stuff like that. It was a fun conversation. But the whole time it just felt weird because I never did that myself. I never talked to a teacher outside the classroom, period, let alone coming back to visit one. Like even Mr. Purvis, who I loved, I never talked to him like outside the classroom. That would have been just weird. And this kid did, and it was great. And I was like, I just kept saying like, thank you for coming back to talk to us. Like it makes everything worthwhile. I was like, it means like I'm actually doing something correct. And so the next day with my 7th graders, I was like, hey, this weird thing happened yesterday. And they're like, what? And I go, a high school kid came back and talked to me after school. They go, why? I go, I don't know. I'm like, he just came back and like hung out and talked. And it was like, I was like, would you guys ever do that? Like, oh, that would be weird. I'm like, that's what I thought. And then like time went by, and like a couple months later, a different kid came back. They're like, hey, I heard Tony came by and talked to you. Can I come in? I was like, I guess, sure. And like the other kid came by, and like a couple months later, like a different kid came. I'm like, is this like a thing you guys do? Like, no, we just want to come by and say hi to you. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I told my kids about it, and they're like, can we come back and do that? I'm like, you want to? And they're like, I don't know, maybe. I'm like, I'm not going to say no. And so yeah, they just started coming back and talking to me. And so this went for a couple of years, where these kids would come back and talk to me. And then it took a turn. And I had kids come back to talk to me, not just to say hi, but to get advice, because they'd screwed up things in their life. And one of the kids, Morgan was a girl who came by in Clayton. And I remember Clayton specifically because his was like a big turning point. He got arrested for smoking pot. Went behind, was the Best Buy up in Noblesville, and was sitting he was a sophomore in high school, and was out there in his car and was smoking pot when the cops came up, and he got busted and was basically arrested for drug charges. And he came in and like this would have been like a couple weeks later. He's like, hey, Mr. B, can I talk? I'm like, yeah, Clayton. I'm like, it's been a while. I loved Clayton. He was a very unusual kid. Did not care what anyone else thought about him. Wore outrageous clothing and specifically tried not to fit in. And I always got along with him because he and I would argue and fight, but in a fun and friendly way. Not like a mean way. It's just like he was very opinionated, and I appreciated that. And when he came back, I was like, Clayton, it's been a long time. I was like, what's up? He was like, hey, I've screwed up. And I was like, what's wrong, Clayton? And he went into it. He's like, hey, I got arrested for smoking pot. And I'm like, man, that's awful. And so he and I would sit there and talk, and he was like, I think it's over. He was like, I'm a sophomore, and my life is done. And I was like, your life's not done. He's like, I'm a kid in high school that's been arrested. He's like, I now have a record. And that's when I was, for the first time, I was like, hey, I don't tell my kids this, but I've been arrested. He's like, what? And so that's what and the first time I told him was the fact that not only have I been arrested, I've been arrested 3 times. And so, surprise. And so each one of those, and that's the stories I lead up to, is each one of those arrests were a thing that could have ruined my life. They could have broken me. They were those things that they were life-ending events. And I didn't. I became stronger from them. And so I told Clayton one of those stories about how, the stories I'll get to you guys here in a little bit, being arrested and how it does feel like it's the end of the world. And it feels like when you screw up like that there's no coming back from it. And so he and I talked for a while, and he kept coming back like every month or so just to get advice. And I don't judge. It's not who I am as a person, regardless of who you are, race or gender or what your beliefs are. I'm very open and accepting of everyone. I got that from my parents. And I think that's why Clayton came back, is the fact that even though he'd gone through this, I didn't judge him. I never looked down on him. I never told him that he was a horrible person. I was like, we get better. I was like, you screwed up, don't get me wrong, but you don't let it break you. You don't let it destroy you. You get stronger from it. And so I would tell him those stories. I had told some of them to my other kids. I had other kids come back. I had Lindsay, who got arrested for shoplifting, and also got arrested for drugs. A lot of high school kids do drugs. Surprise. And so they make poor choices too. And they would come back and talk. And when I talked to these kids, the same thing I did with your guys' bell work. I would ask them, what did I do right? What did I do wrong in class? What could I improve? What do you remember? What is it that did not have an impact? And so I'd have these conversations with them. And then one day, after I was giving the advice about my past poor choices, I don't remember which kid it was, but they were telling me, hey, you should tell your kids those stories. I was like, you want me to tell my 7th graders about me getting arrested? And they're like, yeah, like it helped me. It might help some of them. But like when I was in 7th grade, I had some pretty bad stuff going on. I could have used information like that. And I was like, I'll take it under consideration. I'm not sure I want to go tell like 7th graders about my life stories like that. And they're like, think about it, Mr. B. And I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. But I did. And I did think about it. And one of those things that just sort of sat on me for the next couple of years. And then one day at the end of the year, instead of showing, I would show like The Outsiders or some other movies. I'd give them options about that connected to class. And one day we were talking about a discussion from That Was Then, This Is Now. One of the segues from there about the drug use. And I was talking about the fact that I made poor choices in high school, and the fact that I hung around kids who did a lot of drugs and did a lot of poor choices with my high school career. And I was like, but I got better, and I was like, I ended up, correcting my life, and ended up becoming a full-time dork as opposed to like a part-time dork. And then one of the full-time dork things I committed to was I made home movies with my friends. And so we like acted things out and things like, we did like a CTV where we performed for CTV and stuff like that. And I was like, those were like, oh, I wish we could see those videos. I was like, I have those videos. They're like, you have those videos? I'm like, I have those videos. Like, did you want to see? Like, we want to see those videos. Like, you want to see a video of me in high school? Like, oh, I'm like, okay. And so I would show them those videos, and they thought they were absolutely hilarious, and they made fun of me because I had a ponytail when I was in high school. It was cool back then. And so we'd show them these videos, and it sort of segued from there to these other conversations, especially from That Was Then, This Is Now. And from that book and the conversations where that decision that Mark and Brian have to make, and the fact that I was confronted with similar issues to that with my friends. And I started telling them these stories about me in high school, and it sort of led from there to remembering what those high schoolers told me about opening up about my past mistakes. And I did. And so I realized, talking to them and talking to those high schoolers, that too many adults, specifically too many teachers, treat you guys like your kids, which you are. I mean, you're a year past having recess. I mean, a year ago, you guys would be having recess around this time. But at the same time, within the next year, at the very least, most of you are going to know at least a kid, if not multiple, who do drugs here at school. Because it happens. If not, many of you knowing it this year. So you're at that time where you're in between those two stages. But too many adults don't respect that with you and don't treat you that way. And so that was what I got from these past kids, was to have that talk, that conversation, and to treat you guys like you're adults, and to pass along the information that I want to pass along to you. So that's what I started doing, was sharing with you the mistakes that I've made. Because I'm not perfect. I'm far, far from perfect. And I think too many teachers try to give the impression that they are perfect, and that they don't make mistakes, and that they come from a life where making mistakes is something that's wrong. And that's not what I believe in. I believe you have to make mistakes. I believe if you don't make mistakes, then you're doing something wrong. Making mistakes is not a bad thing. What's bad is when you keep making the same mistakes. And that's a conversation we'll get to next week. And so I decided that in order for you to fully understand me and my life and what I do, I would tell you about the mistakes I've made. And the 3 biggest ones were the 3 times I've been arrested. Because each one of those was that mistake that I thought ended everything, and it didn't. I was able to recover from it. It could have ended it. I could have let any one of these 3 mistakes be the thing that changed my life for the worse. And they came close to. Each one of those was that moment that if it had gone the way it could have, I would not be in front of you here today. But that's not the way it went. And so I would tell those stories with the goal of opening up my heart to you. Because I want you to trust me, because it builds up to next Wednesday. When you guys have heard past kids talk about my stories, or the fact that the stories have an impact, it's mostly next Wednesday is the one that they're talking about. And the reason it's next Wednesday is because I spend the next 3 days giving you more uplifting stories. Right now is my introduction. It's a bit more on the serious side. And then we get to spend the 3 stories of you laughing at me because I was an idiot child. and then we finish back with me trying to be serious again. Because I want you to take my advice to heart. I want you to give it the proper weight so that it lasts with you for a while. But in order for it to have the proper weight, in order for it to impact you the way I want it to impact you, you have to trust me. Because if you don't trust me, then there's no point believing the words I tell you. And I spent this year trying to get you to trust me. That's what this year has been building up to. And by trusting me, it's that idea of liking me, that idea of knowing that I'm not going to lead you astray. Because if you thought about the fact that if any of your other teachers were to tell you, hey, I want you to sit and listen to tales of my childhood for the next 4 days, how you would react to that. And the fact that you did not react that way to me says that you trust me already. Which also means I trust you. Because the stories I get into, they're painful. They're mistakes I've made, and they were not easy ones to go through. But by letting you in to see that side of me, that's me trusting you in order to get you to trust me. And that's when I slap you that last day with a bit of information. And the information I tell you guys next week, all it is me talking to you like you're an adult. Is me telling you this is what you have coming in your future. This is what I want for you. This is what I want you to do to make your life as good as possible. It's just, one, sobering to hear someone tell it to you, and two, many kids never have someone talk to them like that. So that's where the impact comes in. One moment as I go through all the things in my head. Alright, let me do one more serious, and then I get to move on with more uplifting. And the reason being is I'm afraid I'm going to forget to say it if I don't. This has been a good year for me. Hands down, one of my best teaching years. And not because of me. Because of you guys. It's the same thing I'll tell you guys on our last day when I get a chance to talk to our entire team together and all of my classes are in one group, because that's during the Heroes Awards thing. I get to talk to you then. In my 17 years of teaching, there's 3 different levels of my connections. Individual, where I connect to individual kids when you come and talk to me or you send me messages and we have that bonding. The next level is as a classroom. And so each of my class periods has a different personality. My 3rd period has a personality. Your personality is different than my 2nd period personality, which is different than the 1st period personality. It depends on the kids. And how you guys behave in here is different than how you behave in other classes. And so that's a different level. And then there's also my entire team, meaning all my class periods together. My entire team of all my class periods together is one of the best years I've had teaching. And it says a lot about you guys. That you guys overall are a great group of kids. And I say that because, and I don't mean the entire 7th grade. It's a good 7th grade, but specifically the Heroes this year is one of my best Heroes teams. I don't have maliciousness on my team. Big word, I know. A malicious kid is someone who causes pain and heartache and evil in others for the pure joy of heartache and pain and evil. And that's not been something I've had to deal with this year. We've had squabbles, we've had issues, we've had little fights, but I don't have kids who are mean to others just to be mean, which I've had in the past, and which exist in the 7th grade this year. They're just not on my team. So for me, it's been a good year, which changes some of the talks that I give to you, because I give different talks to different classes depending on the kids that are in there. But I wanted to talk about real quick was bullying, because I know it exists, and I know it's always going to exist, and it's always going to be a problem. I was bullied when I was a kid. It's one of those things that it always sticks with you. I was a nerd. I was quiet. I was dorky. I was the book reading kid. I was unathletic. I was a skinny little twiggy of a child. And then when I got to junior high, I had horrible acne. It came in early. It was an early present. Like in 8th grade, it just became like pizza, just all over the place. And it was, I washed my face multiple times a day. I stopped eating sugar and candy and cola my 8th grade year because I heard that sugar and caffeine caused acne more. And so I gave up everything I could to try and stop it. I was on medicine to stop it. It didn't do any good. It's the joy of your body. When your body decides to just terrorize you, it's going to terrorize you. And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can try and fight it a little bit, but if your body decides, yeah, you're going to have acne, you're going to have acne. And you're just going to have to fight through it. And people are going to tell you, it goes away. It does. But while you have it, it sucks. There's no other way to say it. When you're going through it, it's awful. It's the same thing with your body type. Whether you're too short, too fat, too skinny, your body eventually gets there. I was skinny, and eventually I filled out. My brother was a short little round turtle of a kid. And he was a short little round turtle of a kid until he became a junior in high school. And then all of a sudden his body went, nah, we're done with that. And then he shot up taller than I was, became super thin and good looking. And I still hate him to this day because of it. And so it's one of those things where suddenly your body does these things. But while you're going through it, it's tough. And kids are going to attack each other. And I was bullied. And you'll never forget your bullies, by the way. They stay with you. I remember my junior high bullies. Specifically, I remember a kid by the name of Chad Morin. Made fun of me. It was in PE class. He made fun of me in front of girls because I was in the process of trying to mac on the ladies, which I was not good at doing. And I remember him walking. I was like, "Hey, you want some sauce for that face?" And I looked at the ladies, and they started laughing. And I was like, "I'm gonna go cry over there now," because lots of the acne. I remember being home that night and being upset and feeling bad and down on myself because it wasn't the first time Chad had made fun of me. He was persistent and bad about the whole thing. And my mom came in and saw me in my room, and she's like, "What's wrong, hon?" And I was like, it was a bad day. The kid made fun of me, and I told her what she said, or what he said, and she was like, "That's awful." And I was like, "I know." And then she goes, "So he's a friend of yours?" I go, "No, he's a jerk." I might have used different words. And she was like, "Oh." And then she thought about it for a little bit, and she goes, "Did you not know you have acne?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I look in the mirror every day." I'm like, "You buy me medicine, Mom." I'm like, "I know I have acne." And she goes, "Oh." She goes, "Let me get this straight. So you know you have acne?" I go, "Yeah." "And you don't care about this other kid at all?" I go, "No." And she goes, "Then why do you care about what he said?" I go, "Because he said it in front of girls, and he embarrassed me." She goes, "He can't embarrass you." I go, "He did embarrass me, Mom." She goes, "He can't embarrass you, hon. He can't embarrass you unless you let him." I go, "What?" She goes, "Think about it. He's not telling you something you don't know. You know you have acne. And he's not an opinion that you care about. He's a kid that you don't like already. So it's a person you don't like telling you something you already know. The only reason it bothers you is because you let it bother you. You let it